I pretended to be poor for years to test my children, but what they did left me speechless. I always keep a pot of soup on the stove. It's a habit now. Even when I know no one's coming, I still make it lentils, carrots, a hint of rosemary. Something about the smell makes this old Oregon farmhouse feel like it still has a heartbeat. I'm Margaret, 71 this past November. I've lived in the same weather-worn house for almost 50 years. My husband John built most of it himself, back when men took pride in splinters and sunburns. We raised 3 children here, and now it's just me, the walls and the soup. I still remember the day I made a decision, one that would stretch across years and reshape everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty. I would pretend to be poor. Yes, poor. I had my reasons. At first it started small, just not correcting anyone when they assumed I was scraping by on Social Security. Then I stopped driving the Cadillac John left me, traded it in for a rusted Camry, wore the same 3 cardigans, let the house show its age, never mentioned the bank account, the investments, the land. But why? Maybe it was a kind of grief. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe, if I'm being honest, it was curiosity. A terrifying, aching need to know the truth. Would my children still love me if I had nothing to offer? It sounds cruel when I say it out loud, I know. But when the only time you hear from your son is when he wants to borrow against the future inheritance, you begin to wonder. I didn't make a grand announcement. I didn't draw up some elaborate scheme. I just stopped reminding them of the life we once had. I let them believe what they wanted to believe. If they asked, I downplay. If they assumed, I let them. And you know what happened. They adjusted, faster than I expected. My daughter, my firstborn, used to call every Friday like clockwork. But after I turned down her offer to invest in a family business idea, the calls thinned. She was busy, of course. Always busy. My youngest. She stayed sweet but distant. She had her own life, her own worries. She'd stop by once in a while, bring me leftovers from her catering job, but never stayed long. And my son, oh my son. He stopped by when he needed something. Money for the kids' braces. Help with his second mortgage. Just until next month, Mom. He was always polite, always thankful. But only when he needed a favor. So I let them drift. I stayed small. I let them believe I was no longer the woman who once balanced bills and bedtime stories with the strength of 10 men. There's a certain quiet power in being underestimated. It hurts, but it's clear. And when I would sit in this very kitchen alone with my soup, I would ask myself, what if John were here? Would he be proud of me for testing them, or disappointed that I even had to? Because what do you do when you've given your whole life to your children, your time, your health, your sacrifices, and one day you realize they love the version of you who gives, but not the one who needs? I suppose that's why I started this little game. But it wouldn't stay little, because the moment I saw my own daughter glance at my worn shoes and mutter, "You should really treat yourself once in a while, Mom," while simultaneously avoiding eye contact with the stack of unpaid fake bills I left on the counter, I knew I was onto something. They weren't just indifferent. They were watching me fade, and not one of them asked why. Have you ever sat across from your child and realized they see you as optional? I have, and I'll never forget it. So I tightened my cardigan, scooped out the soup, and smiled through dinner like everything was fine, like I hadn't already decided to keep going deeper, longer, quieter. Because if I was wrong about them, then shame on me. But if I was right, well, then I needed to know. When John passed, everything changed, but not in the way people think. Yes, the house fell a little quieter. Yes, the air around the dinner table lost its warmth. But the real change was something colder. Something I couldn't say out loud without choking on it. I stopped feeling like someone they needed. John left me everything. He planned meticulously. Stocks, bonds, life insurance, and most significantly, 40 acres of woodland just outside Eugene land. He bought cheap in the 80s, when no one thought trees could turn into trust funds. Now, with developers hungry for suburban sprawl, that land was worth millions. Quiet millions. But I didn't tell anyone, not even the kids. At first it was grief. I wasn't thinking clearly. The paperwork piled up unopened. I'd sit in John's old chair, wrapped in his flannel robe, and just listen to the wind whistle through the chimney. But then time passed, and the silence from my children grew louder. And that silence, it started to feel like proof. Proof that what they wanted from me wasn't me. So I tested it. I let them assume I was struggling. I wore discount shoes with soles thinning out. I told them the water heater broke and I was boiling water on the stove. I stopped going to the nice grocery store and switched to dented cans and off-brand cereal. It wasn't long before the results came in. My son David texted, just once. Tough times, huh, with a thumbs-up emoji. He was busy as always. Career kids' obligations. When I hinted that I might need help fixing the porch steps, he said, maybe next month, Mom. Things are tight. Tight. He lives in a 5-bedroom house with 2 SUVs in the driveway, but he's tight. My daughter Claire was more subtle. She came over with her expensive perfume and tapped her acrylics on the table like she wanted time to hurry up. When I asked her if she remembered when she used to play under that same table with her dolls, she barely looked up from her phone. You're getting sentimental again, Mom, she said, like it was an accusation. Then there was Lily, my youngest. Sweet, skittish Lily. She brought casseroles and lemon bars like always, but she never stayed. She was always on her way to a client, always just slipping through. And every time I tried to ask how she was really doing, she smiled, said she was fine, and rushed back out like I was just another task on her list. They weren't cruel, not outwardly, but their indifference, it stung more than cruelty ever could. I kept all the inheritance papers in a fireproof box under the bed. I'd take them out at night sometimes just to remind myself I wasn't actually poor, that I had power even if no one saw it, even if no one thought I was worth the kindness they used to show. There were nights I'd sit with John's old checkbook and wonder what he'd say if he could see how the kids treated me now. Would he be angry? Would he scold them? Or would he look at me and ask the question I was afraid to answer? Why do you still love them so much, Margaret? Even now. Because I did. God help me, I did. Every time I looked at David's picture on the mantel, I saw the little boy who used to wait at the window when I came home from shifts at the diner. Every time I heard Claire laugh, even if it was hollow. Now I remembered brushing her hair while she practiced spelling words in bed. And Lily. Oh, Lily. The baby. The soft one. The one who used to sneak into our bed on stormy nights. But now they looked through me. Not like I was invisible, but like I was furniture. Something they'd inherited already worn and fading, just waiting to be dealt with later. So I clutched my secrets tighter. And one morning over oatmeal, I made a decision. I would not tell them about the inheritance. Not now. Not until I truly knew who they were when money wasn't part of the equation. Because if I handed it all over tomorrow, I knew what would happen. Crocodile tears, sudden affections, plans for new renovations and vacations and spa retreats, and behind all that emptiness, the kind that money can't fix, the kind that makes a mother feel like a bank with a heartbeat. No, I needed to see their hearts. I needed to see what they would give when they believed I had nothing left to offer. So I tore up a check I had written for Lily once. She had asked for help with a deposit for a new apartment. I had smiled and said, I wish I could, darling, but I just can't afford it. Her face didn't fall in sadness, it crumpled in irritation. Okay, I'll figure it out, she had muttered, grabbing her purse and leaving in a rush. No hug, no goodbye. That night, I sat on my porch cradling a mug of tea that had gone cold hours before. I watched the moon rise over John's trees, the same ones the developers wanted to clear. And I whispered to him, I'm sorry, John, but I need to do this. I need to know who they really are. Because if I don't know now, I never will. The soup was always warm on Sundays. It became a ritual one I clung to more tightly with each passing year. I would wake early, peel potatoes with the same small knife John once used to cut apples for the kids. I'd let the broth simmer, slowly coaxing flavor out of bones and herbs, like I was trying to breathe life back into something long gone. I set the table for 4, even when I wasn't sure who would come. Sundays used to be sacred. I remember years ago, all 3 of them crowding around the kitchen, sneaking bites from the cutting board. Claire used to sit cross-legged on the counter, dipping bread into stew before I could swat her hand. David would fight her for the bigger piece. And Lily, she'd sit with John at the table, carefully setting out the salt and pepper shakers like she was preparing for royalty. But now it was different. They arrived late, if at all. And when they did show up, it was with plastic smiles and fast glances at the clock. Phones buzzed between spoonfuls. David often came in workout clothes, eating like he was racing the clock. Claire brought wine I couldn't pronounce, poured it into mismatched glasses, then commented about how quaint the house was. Lily always looked like she wanted to be anywhere else but didn't know how to say it. It wasn't one big betrayal. No shouting, no slam doors. It was something quieter, 1,000 tiny cuts. Once I asked Claire how work was going. She sighed dramatically and said, "Let's not talk about that, Mom. It's Sunday. Let's just eat." Then she scrolled through Instagram while I spooned mashed carrots onto her plate. Another Sunday, I told David the water heater was acting up again. I didn't even ask for help, I just mentioned it. He looked at me and said, "You've got to stop living like it's 1982, Mom. Call someone." He didn't offer to call or come, just rolled his eyes like I was a burden even bringing it up. And Lily, my sweet Lily, once whispered to me while we cleared the dishes, "Sometimes I wish we could just meet somewhere else. This place, it's so sad." She didn't realize how that landed. This place, this home, the home she was raised in, the one John and I built with late nights and blueprints and dreams. Sad. But I never said anything. I just nodded, smiled, served more soup. They thought I was growing feeble, that I was losing track of things. I let them. I left the same jigsaw puzzle unfinished on the side table for months, left a single bulb burned out in the hallway just to see if anyone would offer to fix it. No one did. No one asked if I was okay. I had become a Sunday obligation. And yet I kept making the soup. Why? Because hope is stubborn, and mothers are worse. Part of me kept thinking maybe this time will be different. Maybe David will bring the kids and stay longer than an hour. Maybe Claire will remember how she used to dance barefoot in this very kitchen. Maybe Lily will sit beside me without constantly checking her watch. But Sunday after Sunday, it was the same. And each time they left, the silence afterward grew heavier. The room sighed louder. My body ached more. I started keeping a small notebook. Nothing dramatic, just dates, visits, things said or not said. I wrote down when they complimented my sweater only after I mentioned it was a thrift store find. I noted how often they asked about the will without asking about me. Once Claire said over dessert, it might be smart to get things in order. Not that anything's wrong, but just in case. Estate stuff can get messy. She said it with a sip of her wine like it was casual, like she hadn't rehearsed it. David agreed. Yeah, we should probably talk about the house sometime. The house, not me, not my health, not my plans, the house. I nodded and smiled. That night, I cried quietly in the shower, not because of what they said, but because it no longer shocked me. What had I become to them? A holding place for a future gain, or just a worn-down woman who lived alone and made soup from scratch. And yet I couldn't bring myself to stop inviting them. Even a wolf once domesticated still howls when left alone, so I kept the ritual alive. Every Sunday I opened the front door and hoped, and every Sunday I closed it behind them and mourned what had been lost. Sometimes I'd walk around the backyard after they left just to hear something other than my own breathing. The swing John put up for Claire still creaked in the wind. The hydrangeas I planted with Lily bloomed though no one noticed. And the lawn David used to mow it when he was a teenager for $5 and a sandwich. Now he didn't even glance at it. I wondered what they told their friends. Do they say I saw my mom today? Or do they say, had to stop by the old place again? Because there's a difference, a sharp one. And I felt it every Sunday, like a whisper I couldn't silence. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Because the test was only beginning. And what they didn't know was that while they were measuring me, I was measuring them too. It started with the water heater. Or maybe it started long before that with the way David avoided eye contact when I mentioned the front steps were rotting, or how Claire only brought up money when she thought I wasn't paying close attention. But the water heater, that was the first time I really tested them. It had been sputtering for weeks. Showers turning ice cold halfway through the pilot light, going out for no reason. I could have replaced it that day easily, but I didn't. I waited. And then one morning, while the cold water numbed my fingers at the kitchen sink, I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and sent a group message to all 3 of my children. The hot water's been out a while. I can't afford a new one right now. Just thought I'd let you know. Hope everyone's well. It wasn't begging. It wasn't manipulative. Just information, a breadcrumb, something a loving child might follow. David didn't reply for 2 days. Then finally, dang, that sucks. Hope it warms up soon, Lowell. Lol. That's what he sent me. A mother who once held him through midnight fevers and broken bones. A mother who scrubbed grass stains out of his jeans until her knuckles bled. I read that message over and over until the words lost meaning. Claire's response came a few hours later. Maybe try calling a local church. They sometimes help seniors. A local church. This from the girl whose prom dress I stayed up 3 nights sewing by hand because we couldn't afford the designer one she wanted. And Lily came by the next day with a takeout container of vegan soup and a concerned look. She stayed long enough to say, "That sucks, Mom," and offered to find me a secondhand plumber she used once for a client. Then just before she left, she asked if I could Venmo her $25 for the soup. I smiled. I paid her. And when she left, I sat down in the armchair and stared at the clock for a long time. They were showing me who they were, piece by piece. It wasn't just the water heater. A week later, I asked if anyone could give me a ride to the pharmacy. I said my car was acting up, which it wasn't. Of course, I just wanted to see. David read the message and left it on scene. Claire said she was at the salon. Lily offered to order my medication online, said delivery was easier. No one asked what the prescription was for. No one asked if I was okay. Then came the roof. I noticed a small leak forming in the corner of the living room, a stain brown and slow spreading. The same room where all 3 of them used to curl up in a blanket fort and demand cocoa after school. I texted again. Anyone free to help patch a leak this weekend? Just need a second pair of hands. David responded almost immediately this time. I'm swamped with work stuff. Maybe in a couple weeks. Claire wrote, honestly, Mom, you should just sell that place and get an apartment. It's too much for you. Too much for me. Lily didn't reply at all. I started a notebook that night. A little blue spiral tucked in the kitchen drawer right beside my old recipe cards. I wrote down dates, requests, responses. Not as revenge, not even as evidence. As clarity. Because the mind plays tricks when it's hurting. It wants to justify, to excuse, to explain away what it cannot bear to accept. But paper doesn't lie. The more I tested, the more I saw. And the more I saw, the more my heart changed. I had always believed that love was unconditional, that family would find its way back home no matter how far it wandered. But what if the home no longer mattered to them? What if the love I gave so freely had become invisible? I started thinking back to the last time any of them had done something just for me, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but out of kindness, out of love. I couldn't remember. And that realization, it settled on my chest like a heavy stone I couldn't shake off. Still, I kept testing. I accidentally left an envelope marked past due on the counter when they visited. It was blank inside, of course, just paper. I wanted to see if anyone noticed. Claire glanced at it, frowned, and said, "Yikes." David didn't even look at it. Lily picked it up, read it quietly, and then asked if I wanted help setting up a GoFundMe. I laughed. She thought I was joking. That night, I climbed into bed without brushing my teeth. I couldn't bear to look in the mirror. I didn't want to see the woman they saw, a tired, needy old woman they barely recognized. But I wasn't tired, and I wasn't needy. I was watching. I was learning. And the more I saw, the more I realized maybe I had fooled them for years. But they had fooled me for longer. There's something you should know about me. I was never a weak woman. Even when the house shook with crying babies and overdue bills, even when John worked doubles and I took night shifts, even when I wore holes in my shoes, before buying new ones, I held this family up like scaffolding. Quietly, unseen, but always there. So when I started needing help and none came, I didn't collapse. I got curious, because there's a difference between a request and a test. A mother's love asks for help softly out of vulnerability, but a woman who's been hurt, she asks to see who's still standing next to her when there's nothing left to gain. And I asked, just to see who would take and under what conditions. I offered small tasks. Could you help me hang some pictures this weekend? I was thinking about cleaning out the attic would be easier with a second pair of hands. These weren't burdens, they were breadcrumb invitations. Chances for one of them, just one to step in without strings. But each time I got answers like, maybe next week, things are hectic. Why don't you hire someone off Craigslist? I can ask my boyfriend, but we'd have to work around his schedule. It wasn't that they said no. It was how they said no. Like I was asking them to move mountains for me when all I wanted was presence, time, care. I remember asking David if he could pick up groceries for me. I gave him a short list: milk, eggs, bread, tea. 4 things. He dropped them off the next day, but forgot the tea. When I mentioned it gently, he shrugged and said, "You can live without one thing, Mom." And just like that, I realized I already was. I was living without 3 children, 3 fully grown adults who once clung to my legs and begged me not to leave the room, who now made me feel like asking for company was an inconvenience. So I changed my approach. I began to give instead. Not money, not gifts, opportunities. I told David I'd found an old box of baseball cards in the attic, some of them vintage. He was at my door within the hour. He rifled through the box like a kid again, then asked too casually, "You thinking of selling these? I know a guy." I nodded and said maybe, unless I give them to someone who truly values them. He laughed, said, "Well, I've always loved them, remember?" I remembered all right. I remembered buying them with grocery money I didn't have, and I remembered how long it had been since he asked me how I was sleeping. Claire was next. I told her I'd found some old jewelry, just costume stuff, I said. She stopped by that weekend breezy and perfumed, flipping through the velvet box with disinterest until she came across a locket that had belonged to John's grandmother. "Oh," she said, feigning casualness, "this is actually really nice if you ever want to get rid of it." I smiled. "Maybe one day," I said, "to someone who's earned it." She paused, then smiled back, but her eyes narrowed. It was Lily who surprised me. I told her I'd found an envelope full of old cash, just $20 bills tucked into a book long forgotten. I said it like it was nothing, just something interesting from a dusty old life. She looked at me, really looked, and said, "I hope you keep it. Maybe do something for yourself for once. No reach, no ask, just that." And for a flicker of a second, I saw the girl she used to be. The girl who used to sing to the dog and fold her socks into little hearts. But even that flicker dimmed too quickly, because a week later she texted, "If you still have that money, could I borrow $200 for a work emergency? Promise I'll pay you back." I never saw it again. It wasn't just the things they took, it was the way they took them. I left an envelope labeled mortgage info on the kitchen counter, visible during one of David's quick drop-ins. It was blank, just a decoy. He asked nothing, didn't even glance at it twice. A week later, I sent Claire an article about retirement homes with the message, "Just thinking ahead. Would love to talk sometime." She hearted the message and never brought it up again. So I started planning, not to punish, to prepare. Because the world doesn't owe you loyalty just because you gave someone life, but you do owe yourself honesty. And finally, after all these years, I was beginning to see things clearly. I thought back to my wedding day, the way John squeezed my hand when we said our vows, how he whispered, "We'll build something they can stand on." I had built it, but they were standing on me, not beside me. So now I was ready to shift the weight, to stop giving blindly, to start choosing carefully. Because there's a difference between giving and being taken from. And I was done pretending not to know the difference. I didn't expect a party. I'm not foolish. I didn't expect balloons or singing or a cake with my name iced in cursive. But I thought, maybe a call, a card, a message that said, "I remember you were born today. 70 years on this earth, and not one of my 3 children remembered. Not one. I woke early, as always. Let the kettle hiss while I opened the curtains. The Oregon sky was still painted gray, but there was a softness to the morning light, the kind that reminds you you're still here. That time is still moving, whether you're part of it or not. I dressed nicely that day, just in case. A dusty blue blouse John always liked. I brushed my thinning hair a little longer, even dabbed on some perfume, just a drop behind each ear. Then I waited. The phone didn't ring. I made myself pancakes, ate them slowly, poured a second cup of tea. Still silence. No knock at the door. No vibration of a text. By noon, I told myself it was fine. Maybe they were just running late. Maybe someone was planning a surprise. I tried not to be 12 years old again, sitting at the window with a balloon string wrapped around my wrist, hoping someone remembered me. But I was 70, and I knew better. At 3:04 p.m., I broke. I went into my bedroom, shut the door, and let the quiet swallow me whole. My hand touched the frame on my nightstand, John and I on our wedding day, his smile so certain, so full of promise. I pressed my thumb over his face and whispered, "They don't remember me, John. Not even today." It wasn't that they forgot a birthday. It was that they forgot me. I stayed in that room until the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the carpet. When I came out, the house felt colder. The soup I'd kept warm on the stove had grown a skin across the top. I dumped it down the drain. I stood at the sink, watched the last of it swirl away, and I think something inside me swirled down with it. Because I had been testing them, yes, but this was different. This wasn't bait. This wasn't a game. This was real. They had forgotten their mother's birthday. It wasn't until almost midnight that my phone buzzed. My heart jumped. Yes, even then. Hope is ridiculous that way. It was a group text from Claire, a meme. Something about wine and Mondays. Not even close. Not even a clue. David posted a photo on social media that night, him at a bar, laughing, surrounded by friends. Claire shared a story about her spa day. Lily was silent as usual, probably tangled in her own webs. So I opened my notebook. And on a fresh page I wrote, "Today they all failed the simplest test of love." And under that I wrote the date. Then I closed the notebook and made myself a small promise. No more pretending they'd get it one day. No more holding space in my heart for people who couldn't be bothered to check the calendar. It wasn't just a forgotten birthday. It was proof. Proof that the person I used to be to them, the warm, humming, soup-stirring center of their world, was now a background noise, a memory collecting dust in the corners of their grown-up lives. I poured myself a small glass of wine, sat by the window, and watched the stars blink overhead. I told myself not to cry, that I was done crying. But the tears came anyway. They weren't loud, they weren't dramatic. They were quiet, hot, and steady. And with each one, I let go of something, an old hope, a younger version of myself, a myth that love from your children is always guaranteed. Because maybe it isn't. Maybe we teach them how to treat us by how much of ourselves we give without asking for anything in return. And maybe I had given too much. The next morning, I folded the blue blouse and put it away deep in the drawer. I didn't want to see it again. Not for a while. I spent the day in the garden. My hands in the dirt, my knees aching against the soil, the sun warming my shoulders. I planted marigolds and peas, and some lavender, too. It helped. The earth always does. But the ache in my chest that lingered. Because even the strongest roots can't hold up the weight of forgetting. Especially when the ones who forget are the ones you gave everything to. The week after my birthday, something shifted. Something deep and quiet, like a door I had been holding open for years, finally creaked shut. I didn't slam it. I didn't lock it. I just stepped back. I stopped sending the Sunday texts. No reminders, no invitations, no warm photos of soup bubbling on the stove. I waited to see what would happen if I disappeared just a little. If I removed myself from the edge of their lives, would they notice the silence where I used to be? At first, nothing. David didn't call. He used to phone on Sunday nights, though, mostly to ask about any updates on the will. When I didn't text, he didn't either. A few days passed, then a week. Nothing. Claire was busy, of course. She always was. Hair appointments, charity galas, spa days. I'd become another appointment she didn't quite have time for. And Lily, she used to drop by with her 2 small containers of soup and her half-hugs always looking somewhere else. But now, nothing at all. It was like I'd been erased. But here's the strange part: I didn't feel empty. I felt free. I started sleeping in. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. I let the house fall into its natural rhythm, quiet, unbothered. I let the dust gather on the mantel where their childhood pictures sat. I didn't wipe it away. It became a kind of experiment. What would happen if I stopped being the anchor? How long before they noticed the boat drifting? I didn't disappear completely. I was still here. But I no longer reached out. I no longer reminded them I existed. And the silence that followed, it was louder than any argument could have been. 2 weeks passed before I saw David's name light up on my screen. I let it ring. I watched it buzz across the table like a wasp I didn't want to swat. No voicemail. Another 3 days later, Claire texted, "Haven't heard from you. Everything okay?" No emoji. No warmth. Just curiosity guilt. Who can say, I didn't respond. Not out of pettiness, but because I needed to know. I needed to know if they'd come to me out of love or just concern for what I might cost them later. Lily was the last to reach out, a single message. "Miss you, Mom. Been thinking about you. Want to grab coffee soon?" No ask, no pretense. That one made me pause. I didn't say yes, but I didn't delete it either. Still, the house was quieter than ever. I spent afternoons reading books I'd been meaning to finish for decades. I went through old boxes of letters from John, yellowed and folded, stained with decades of love and time. His handwriting still made me ache. "Don't ever let them forget who you are, Maggie." He once wrote in a note tucked behind a photo of our first home. "You're stronger than you think. You always have been." I read that line 100 times, and I wondered, had I let them forget? Had I become too small in my own story? Had I shrunk myself to make space for their lives, their egos, their noise? I looked around the house and realized I had built a sanctuary and then allowed myself to become the servant in it. Not anymore. So I started cleaning out the corners, not of dust, but of expectation. I gave away knickknacks that no longer meant anything to me. I sorted through linen closets, letting go of old towels and forgotten gifts. I donated coats I hadn't worn in years. And I found something under a pile of Christmas cards from 10 years ago. A letter John wrote but never sent, dated 1 year before he passed. In it, he wrote, "If you're reading this, it means I'm not there to remind you that you're not invisible. You've spent your whole life holding others up. If they forget who you are, remind them or let them live with the loss of not knowing you." It hit me like a thunderclap. Not anger, not revenge, but resolve. So I made a decision. Not yet action, but intention. I would no longer be a ghost in their lives. I would make myself visible again, but on my terms. And when I did, it would not be through pleading texts or lukewarm invitations. It would be something solid, final, quietly powerful. But for now, I let them sit in the silence they had helped create. Because silence teaches too. And sometimes when your voice has been ignored long enough, the loudest thing you can do is stop speaking. It was a Tuesday when I visited the nursing home. Rain whispered against the windshield as I pulled into the cracked parking lot. Not one of my children knew I was going. I didn't tell them. I didn't ask for a ride. I didn't say why. I had received a letter from an old friend, Marlene. We taught at the same elementary school for years. She retired early after her husband died, then slowly faded out of our weekly coffees and monthly dinners until all that was left between us was silence. The letter came out of nowhere, short, shaky handwriting. "If you have time, come see me. I don't think I have much longer." So I went. The building was beige, bland blank, like a place designed to be forgotten. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and boiled vegetables. The receptionist gave me a half smile and pointed toward room 114. I walked down the hallway lined with wheelchairs and wandering eyes. Some residents watched me with a hunger I couldn't name. Others looked past me, eyes fogged over like old windows. No one bothers to clean anymore. Marlene's room was near the end. She was thinner than I remembered, her once bright red hair now wisps of gray across a liver-spotted pillow. But her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Margaret," she whispered, almost startled by her own joy. I sat beside her and we talked. At first, just surface things, the weather, the soup, old memories from staff meetings. But then she grabbed my hand and held it tighter than I expected. "They don't come," she said. "My boys, they don't come anymore. They used to. But now I'm just someone they call on holidays." I stayed quiet. She must have seen something in my face because she added, "Do yours come?" And I answered honestly, "Not lately." She nodded like that made us sisters. We sat in silence for a while, after that the hum of a television in the hallway filling the space between us. That visit shook me, because I saw myself in her bed. I saw the future. I feared that I'd end up in a room with floral curtains and strangers calling me by the wrong name, that I'd become someone's forgotten obligation. I drove home slowly, the rain heavier now. My hands trembled on the wheel, not from fear, but from knowing that if I didn't act soon, I'd become another story of a mother who gave everything and died waiting. The next morning, I brewed tea and sat at the kitchen table staring at a photograph of my children taken 20 years ago. They looked happy, safe, loved. And I remembered what it felt like to be needed, not tolerated, not pitied, needed. That afternoon, Claire called. She wanted to know if I'd heard about a new retirement community opening nearby. They're doing tours. It might be time to start thinking about transitions. I bit my lip. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't ask if I was lonely. Just transitions, as if I were an old appliance being moved into storage. I let her finish her pitch. Then I said, "Thanks, sweetheart. I'll think about it." And I hung up. Afterward, I opened my notebook. I flipped through the pages, dates, requests, silence, dismissals, empty promises. My handwriting had grown more certain, more deliberate. I added a new entry. Visited Marlene, alone in a place full of ghosts. Her sons forgot her. I won't let mine do that to me. And under that, in bold ink, begin planning quietly. Because I had seen what the end looked like, and I refused to be tucked away and forgotten. That evening, I cooked stew for one. I lit a candle not out of loneliness but defiance, and as the wind rattled the window panes, I whispered to myself, "You are not a forgotten woman. Not yet. Not ever." Because the truth I'd begun to accept was this: if your love is conditional, so is my generosity. And soon, they would learn what that really meant. I decided to call a family meeting. Not a request, not a plea. Just a message sent through our shared group chat as impersonal and sterile as they'd made every conversation for the last several years. "I'd like to have dinner this Sunday. All three of you. No exceptions. It's important." I half expected Claire to respond with a conflict, maybe a fundraiser or a work trip. I expected David to suggest rescheduling. Lily. She'd probably say she was emotionally overwhelmed and needed a few days. But they all said yes. Maybe it was the word important. Or maybe they finally smelled something in the air, a shift, a quiet urgency. I spent all day preparing. The soup, as always, was bubbling by noon. I made their favorites: roast chicken with garlic and thyme for David, scalloped potatoes for Claire, and for Lily, a peach cobbler from scratch, even though she'd stopped eating sugar months ago. They arrived staggered. Claire showed up first, fashionably late as usual, sweeping into the kitchen like she was doing me a favor. David followed, tapping at his phone even as he kissed my cheek. Lily came last, head down, distracted. They all sat around the table like guests, not like children returning home. That alone broke my heart a little. But I smiled. I served. I let the silence settle between bites. Let them wonder. And then I cleared my throat. "I've written a will." All three froze. David blinked. Claire's fork paused midair. Lily looked at me like she didn't understand English. I continued gently. I thought it was time. You never know what's around the corner, and I didn't want there to be any confusion. Claire recovered first. "Well, that's good, I guess. Did you use a real attorney?" "I did." David leaned forward. "So, what does it say?" I met his eyes. I left everything to charity. Silence. The kind of silence that falls not out of grief, but disbelief. "You're joking," Claire said flatly. David laughed. Okay, Mom, come on, really. I'm serious, I said. I've spoken with a lawyer. Everything is arranged. The house, the land, the savings. It's all going to charity. Lily just stared at me. David's face hardened. Why would you do that? Claire crossed her arms. You think we don't deserve anything? I think I said softly that inheritance should go to those who truly care, who give not just take. Claire's eyes narrowed. We are your children, and I am your mother, I said. A mother you visit out of habit, a mother you forget on her birthday, a mother who asks for help and receives excuses. I'm not angry. I'm just awake. Lily spoke for the first time. Is this some kind of punishment? No, I said. It's clarity. It's peace. David stood up. You're making a mistake. I looked at him long and slow. No, David. I've made many. But this isn't one of them. Claire pushed her chair back, scraping it loudly across the floor. I can't believe this. And I said, I know. That's the problem. Lily didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there, her mouth pressed in a thin line, her eyes wet but defiant. They left one by one. David didn't hug me. Claire didn't look back. Lily lingered at the door. She whispered, you didn't have to do this. And I answered, I did. Because if I didn't now, I never would. That night, the house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum. But inside me, a strange calm, because the seed had been planted. They thought they knew who I was, what I had, what I owed them. Now they weren't sure of anything. And sometimes uncertainty is the only way to get someone's full attention. The next morning, the phone didn't stop ringing. Claire was first. Her voice was sharp, tight, professional. The tone she probably used when a client surprised her with a bad contract. Mom, we need to talk. That dinner was alarming. You're clearly under stress. Let's go over the will together. I know a very good estate planner who specializes in family assets. We can fix this. Fix this. As if I had broken something by choosing to value myself. Then David called. He didn't bother with niceties. Why are you doing this seriously, after everything we've done for you? The words hung in the air like mold. Everything they'd done. I thought about the leaky faucet still dripping in the kitchen, the unpaid attention, the way my name was slowly replaced with Mom only when it served a purpose. I'm not changing it, I said calmly. He scoffed. You think giving it to strangers makes more sense than to your own children? No, I said. I think giving it to people who care makes more sense than giving it to people who only show up when they think it's payday. He hung up. Lily didn't call. Not at first. She sent a long message that began with, I know you think you're teaching us something, but this is cruel. Cruel. As if watching my children become strangers had been kindness. I sat with that word for a while. Cruel. I could have screamed, but what would be the point? They weren't hearing me. They were hearing the sound of wealth slipping through their fingers, not the quiet of a mother's heart, breaking for years. Still, the news had landed. The will my quiet rebellion had torn the illusion wide open. For so long, they thought I was powerless, dependent, a harmless woman baking pies and waiting to be handled like estate paperwork. Now they weren't so sure. A week passed, and Claire showed up at the door. No warning, no smile. She walked in like it was still her house. Mom, she said, sitting down in the living room, I've spoken with a lawyer. You don't have to do this. We can fix this without drama. This doesn't have to turn into some big thing. I brought her tea anyway. Habit is a cruel master. Why does it bother you so much, I asked. She blinked. Because it's irrational. Irrational, I repeated. You mean inconvenient. She looked away. I leaned in. Tell me one thing you've done for me this year that wasn't followed by a request. She didn't answer. Tell me the last time you called just to ask how I slept. Still silence. You think I owe you something, Claire. That I exist to reward you for being related to me. But being my child is not a job. An inheritance is not a salary. She sat back. Her eyes shimmered with something I couldn't name. I just thought it would be different, she whispered. So did I. She left a few minutes later, the tea untouched. David didn't come. He sent a typed letter as if we were business partners. It was cold, impersonal, filled with legal suggestions and lines like, we believe a family mediator may help. I didn't respond. And Lily. She showed up 3 days later, her eyes puffy, hands shaking. "Mom," she said barely above a whisper, "I'm sorry." I didn't speak. She sat at the kitchen table in the chair John used to sit in and cried quietly into her sleeves. "I got caught up," she said. "I got scared. I didn't know we were losing you until you pulled away." I still didn't speak. I didn't need to. Sometimes the silence says more. She stood up to leave but paused at the door. "I don't want your money," she said. "I just want another chance." That night I added one more note to the blue notebook. Only one remembered who I am. And it wasn't until after the storm hit. Then I lit a candle in the living room, turned off all the lights, and sat with the quiet. Not the lonely kind, the earned kind. Because for the first time in years, I had said something loud and clear. You don't get to treat me like an afterthought and still expect a seat at the table. Not anymore. After the will reveal, the world went quiet again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was heavier, charged tense, thick with unspoken words they didn't dare say aloud. It wasn't the silence of forgetting. It was the silence of calculating, of waiting, of watching. I had cracked their reflection of me, and now they didn't know what to see. David went completely dark. No texts, no calls, not even his usual copy-pasted, "Hope you're doing well" messages. His absence wasn't surprising, but it did sting in a way I couldn't quite name. Like I was standing in front of a house I helped build, only to find the locks changed and no key left under the mat. Claire posted cryptic quotes on social media. "Some people forget who helped them when they had nothing. Families should never be about money. You'll miss me when I'm gone." None of them tagged, but all of them pointed. Lily, to her credit, came by. She didn't bring soup or flowers or apologies wrapped in guilt. She just sat beside me on the porch swing John hung 40 years ago and let the silence stretch between us. Sometimes that's the most honest language there is. I made tea. We drank it. She told me about her job, about a friend who was going through a divorce, about how hard it was to live in a world where everyone expected you to be fine even when you weren't. She didn't ask about the will, not once. When she left, she hugged me longer than usual, no words. Just arms, and I held her back. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a burden being held. I felt like a mother, just a mother. And still, I kept the notebook. Not to document their failures anymore, but to remember this. These moments of truth. The rare glimpses of sincerity that hadn't been rehearsed or bartered for. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. Real paper, my name handwritten on the front. I opened it slowly. It was from Lily's son, my grandson. He was 13. Inside he wrote, "Hi, Grandma. Mom said you've been sad. I don't want you to be. I like your house. I like the old dog. I like your stories. I hope you don't move away. Can I come over soon?" I wept. Not because the letter was elegant, it wasn't. The spelling was off, the grammar sloppy. But it was real. And that boy, he remembered me without needing to be reminded. So I wrote him back. A full page. I included a silly drawing. I baked chocolate chip cookies and mailed them in a tin, just like I used to when his mother was his age. The next week, he came over. Lily brought him, stayed outside in the car while we played cards, and he asked for seconds of everything. He told me school was hard, that his dad was mean sometimes, that he liked it better here, because I listened. I didn't say much, but in that moment I knew. The line ends here. I don't owe my children any more excuses, but maybe I owe him a future one, built on presence, not absence. Because what I had learned in all that silence was simple. The people who love you show up. The people who don't, they explain why they can't. And I was tired of explanations. I wanted presence. I deserved it. So I sat down and opened the folder that held the real will. Not the draft I'd shown them, the real one. I reread every line, made small edits, tightened a few instructions. I added one clause for Lily's son. And one final note for my children. To those who saw me only in the light of what I could give you, know that I saw you too. Clearly, I always have. And this is not revenge. It is simply the truth written with a pen steadier than your love has ever been. Then I closed the folder and sealed the envelope. The storm had passed, but I was not the same woman standing in the sun that followed. I was not waiting for them to come back. I was done waiting altogether. The envelope was small, barely thicker than the bills and junk mail it arrived between, but I knew the moment I saw it that it wasn't just a note. It was a lifeline. It arrived a week after my final edits to the will. I had just come in from the garden, hands covered in dirt, and rosemary, the sky gray with coming rain. I nearly tossed the letter onto the entryway table like all the others, but the handwriting stopped me. Large, uneven, still learning how to shape an M without dragging it across the whole line. I smiled before I even opened it. "Dear Grandma, Mom said I could write to you instead of texting because letters feel fancier." I sat down on the kitchen bench, elbows resting on the old wood, and read it slowly, savoring every misspelled word like it was a gift wrapped just for me. "I like your soup, even though Mom says I shouldn't have too much salt. I like the stories you told about Mom when she was little. You're not boring. I think you're kind of like a magic tree. You just know stuff." Magic tree. I pressed the paper to my chest. There it was, confirmation that I wasn't forgotten, that someone still saw me as more than a faded photograph on a dusty shelf. He went on. "I want to come visit again. Mom said maybe soon. Can I help with the garden? Can I bring my sketchbook? You can tell me more about Grandpa. He sounds like a good guy." My hands shook as I folded the letter back into its envelope. I walked into the living room, sat in John's old armchair, and let the emotions swell. Not grief, not regret. Hope, not for my children, but for what might still be salvaged from the wreckage. I called Lily that evening. She answered quickly. "He wrote to you," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it in years. "Yes," I replied. "He sees more than the three of you ever did." She didn't argue. "I think about that a lot," she said quietly. "How we let you fade." I didn't reply. Silence doesn't always mean forgiveness. Sometimes it just means I'm still listening. She took a breath. "He wants to see you again. I'll bring him this weekend if that's okay." "It is." I hung up and sat with the quiet. This time, it didn't feel so sharp. The house didn't echo like a tomb. It sounded patient. That weekend he came. His sketchbook was worn covered in stickers, pages dog-eared. He drew the garden, the bird feeder, my hands. "I like your hands," he said. "They look like they know stories." I nearly cried. We picked tomatoes and planted mint. We made lemonade. I told him about how John once tried to build a treehouse and ended up with a broken toe and a hammock instead. He laughed so hard he fell backward in the grass. And I knew with painful, beautiful certainty this boy was worth everything. He didn't want what I had. He wanted me. That night after they left, I opened the will one last time. I added another clause. This one was just a note. "To my grandson, you saw me when no one else did. You listened. You sat beside me. Whatever I leave you will never match what you've given back to me. Presence, joy, and proof that love doesn't skip generations. It just sometimes has to jump over the broken ones." I folded it back into its envelope, sealed it tight, and placed it back under my pillow, for safekeeping. And for the first time in years, I slept without waking in the middle of the night, reaching for a name that never called me first. Because I didn't need to be everything to everyone anymore. I just needed to be something real to someone. And I was. They came just after lunch, Lily and her son pulling into the gravel drive in a quiet blue sedan I'd never seen before. She looked different as she stepped out. No makeup, no distraction, no phone in her hand, just her and him. He ran toward me with a crumpled drawing in his fist, his hair a little wild from the wind. "Grandma," he called, "I drew your garden." And he had. Wobbly rows of tomatoes, a giant sun smiling in the corner, and two stick figures holding hands, one tall and thin, one hunched but beaming. I was the beaming one. I knelt down and hugged him tight. I didn't let go right away. Lily stood at the edge of the path watching. Her arms were crossed, not in defense this time, but like someone holding her own weight, like she was ready, finally, to face the thing she'd been tiptoeing around for years. I invited them in. The house felt lighter than it had in months. The curtains fluttered in the breeze, the scent of cinnamon bread lingering from the morning. I'd baked it for him. He ate 3 slices. Lily stayed quiet for a while, sipping tea, eyes flicking over the familiar photos, furniture, the crack in the tile John never fixed. Then she asked, "Is it too late?" I looked at her. "For what?" "To be the daughter you deserved." The words hung in the air, no garnish, no pretense. And I said no, but you'll have to start from the beginning. She nodded. I can do that. Her son was drawing again, curled up on the couch beside the old dog. He looked up and smiled. You're nicer than Mom said, he whispered, grinning. Lily laughed, and it wasn't fake. It wasn't tired. We spent the afternoon in a kind of suspended time. We picked flowers from the yard. She helped me sort through an old box of Christmas ornaments, some still dusted in tinsel and pine needles, from 20 years ago. She paused when she found a picture of her as a child missing 2 front teeth, dressed like a reindeer in a school play. Did you keep all of these? She asked. All of them, I replied, even the ones you thought I threw out. I wanted her to know I had never let go of her, even when she let go of me. We talked about little things, then big ones. She apologized for forgetting my birthday. She apologized for being quiet when I needed her loud. She apologized for letting her brothers speak over me around me like I wasn't even in the room. I didn't cry, because my heart had cried enough. But I did reach across the table, placed my hand on hers, and said, I never needed perfect children. I just needed present ones. And she nodded, wiping her eyes. Then I'll be here, she whispered. As the sky turned golden and the shadows stretched long across the porch, we sat outside together 3 generations. Her son laid his head in my lap, tired from sunshine and cookies. Lily leaned back, eyes closed. For the first time in years, no one was asking for anything. No one was angling. No one was pretending. They were just there. That night after they left, I didn't write in the notebook. I didn't need to. Instead, I pulled out the real will again and placed a star beside Lily's name. I left a small handwritten note in the envelope. You found your way back not with apologies, but with presence. That's all I ever wanted. I didn't know if David or Claire would ever come around. I wasn't waiting. This visit didn't undo everything, but it was something honest. And honesty is rare currency in a family built on silence. The next morning, I found the crumpled garden drawing tucked under the flower vase. On the back, written in shaky pencil, were 5 words. You are my magic tree. And I cried not out of sorrow, but something softer. Something like healing. The land is quiet in the early morning. That's when I hear John the clearest. The trees he planted swayed gently, whispering secrets in the wind, like they did when we were young and thought time would wait for us. But it didn't. Time moved on, and so did they, my children, all except Lily, who now visits weekly, sometimes with her son, sometimes alone, always with less armor and more truth. But Claire and David, they haven't come back. They don't know that I changed the will again, quietly, without fanfare. No more shocks, no more performances, just facts, just ink and intention. They still think it's going to charity. Let them. Because what they don't know is that the land they ignored, the too much house, the crumbling porch, the backyard they never bothered to mow, is worth millions. The development offer came just 2 weeks ago, a firm out of Portland. Slick suits, a handshake I didn't accept, not yet. They called it a generational investment opportunity. Funny, generations did build this place, but they didn't all earn it. So I took the offer to a new attorney, someone recommended by the church, a woman who didn't blink when I told her I wanted to give most of it away, but not to my children. To whom then, she asked? To someone who saw me. So we set it all up. A trust for my grandson, a scholarship fund in John's name, a foundation to support single mothers because I had been one, because I remembered. And yes, a small sum for Lily, not because she cried or apologized, but because she stayed, because she planted new roots where old ones had been left to rot. Claire and David. I left them letters, not long ones, just enough to say what I never could while they were busy pretending to hear me. Claire, you love the spotlight but never the stagehands. You saw me as scenery. One day you'll look back and see the mother you missed was never in your way. She was holding the whole structure up. By the time you notice, I'll be gone. David, your silence was always the loudest thing in the room, and I filled the space with hope until it drowned me. This is not a punishment. It's a record of what was and what wasn't. I loved you. I still do. But love without respect is hollow, and I'm done pretending I don't feel the echo. Some would call it revenge, but I call it recalibration. Because I didn't start this to hurt anyone. I started it because I needed to know, needed to be sure. They say money changes people, but in my experience, it reveals them. And what it revealed in my family was both painful and necessary. Now I live with fewer expectations and more peace. I still keep the soup pot warm, still bake bread on Wednesdays, still hum the same hymn John used to whistle when he carved fence posts out back. But I no longer keep my phone nearby waiting for a call that won't come. I answer when it rings, sure, but I no longer beg. I no longer hope they'll become the people I imagined they might grow into. Instead, I cherish the ones who are already becoming who they're meant to be, like my grandson. He built me a birdhouse last weekend, painted it sky blue with shaky brushstrokes and a crooked roof. It's not perfect, he said, embarrassed. I kissed the top of his head and whispered, neither am I. But we show up. We build anyway. And sometimes showing up is the only thing that really matters. The house felt different now. Not because it was cleaner or quieter or lonelier, but because for the first time in years it was mine again. Not a waiting room, not a vault for memories or unspoken resentment, just a home, with creaking floors and hand-stitched curtains and drawers that stick when the weather turns. I didn't need to wait for their footsteps anymore. I'd stopped holding my breath, and in that piece I made my final decision. No ceremony, no dramatic goodbye. Just a walk to the lawyer's office in a soft cardigan and sensible shoes. I brought the signed document sealed and initialed. Inside the envelope was everything that mattered: the revised will, the trust instructions, the letters. It was all there. I handed it to her across a tidy oak desk. "Is this everything you want?" she asked gently. I nodded. "It's everything they need," I said. I walked home slowly. The late afternoon light turned the sidewalk golden, and the trees whispered secrets again, low and rustling, like John's voice in the garden when he used to talk to the tomatoes. The house welcomed me like an old friend. I stepped inside, peeled off my shoes, and sat by the window. The same chair, the same view, the same me, only steadier. I looked over the photos on the mantel. I didn't take them down. I still loved them. I always would. But I wasn't waiting for them to love me back the way I needed. I had loved them as best I could, and now I had loved myself enough to stop pretending that was enough. Lily texted that evening. "He wants to sleep over this weekend. Is that okay?" I replied, "Of course. I'll make his favorite. And maybe yours, too." I added a smiley face, not out of habit, but out of softness, out of hope. I put the kettle on. I pulled down the quilt. I dusted off the second pillow, and I smiled. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. But because I had chosen peace over performance. Because I had chosen myself. Because I had finally stopped begging to be seen and started living in the light I had always been carrying. Let them wonder. Let them rage. Let them tell whatever story they need to in order to feel better about their absence. I no longer need their version of me, because I know who I am, and that's enough. The wind moves gently tonight. It brushes against the curtains, and the stars begin their quiet shimmer across the sky. I sit by the window, cup and hand-warm light spilling across the old floorboards. I don't need much. I never did. The house is still, but not empty. There's laughter tucked in the corners, now new laughter. A child's voice asking why birds sing in the morning. A granddaughter humming while helping with dishes. A future not built on regret or obligation, but presence, willingness, heart. Sometimes I hear the echo of their younger voices, David yelling across the yard, Claire reading aloud in the sunroom, Lily humming to herself on the porch swing. They still live inside me, even if they never come back through the door. And that's okay. I no longer carry hope like a burden. I carry it like a candle. Soft, steady, my own. The soup still simmers on Sundays. The porch light still glows at dusk. But the woman who waits is not the same. She waits for no one now. She simply is. If I go tomorrow, I go. Knowing this, I lived honestly. I gave what I had. And when the time came to draw a line, I did so with love, not revenge. Let them call it what they want. I call it grace.